Kristen, thank you so much for being with me today. I followed you for some time, and definitely a fan of some of your work, your writing, and also your focus on process improvement and leadership. I'm a big believer that we're like a canvas. We're constantly learning and evolving as part of the masterpiece of our person and also our career. I'd love to focus on pivotal moments. I think we've all had them at any point in career, those pivotal moments that can be game changing, and especially that we look back and we realized how much we learned from. Do you have any pivotal moments during your career that really changed how you approach work?
Yeah, I've had a few. I'll start with one that's really tangible. Many years ago, when I was a younger woman, I ran for lieutenant governor back in the state of Maryland. I was working with governor at the time, Governor Ehrlich, and he ran for governor again and asked me to run. And at the time, I was on his cabinet and I was running an agency. It was Department of Disabilities, and it was the first in the country. And all my time and energy went into that department. It was very important for me, right? Vulnerable populations, helping them get employment and independence, et cetera. So Medicaid, all that stuff. So then I become a candidate for LG, and you got to go out on the circuit. By the way, I'll never run for public office statewide again. It's exhausting. We always hit our public leaders, but these are hard jobs. So we toured the state, and I would hear from correctional officers, and then I would hear from people on the environment for Chesapeake Bay, and then I would hear about the challenges farmers are facing. Then you go to inner city Baltimore, and you'd see all the issues with crime and school and funding education and teacher retainment and on and on and on. And while I knew about those things, I would read them in the news. I knew what was going on, but I didn't have ownership of them. And all of a sudden, my perspective just grew, right? Because now it wasn't just my little department under this governor. I know I've started to appreciate him more. All of these things now have got to come into play when you're trying to manage this. And the point in all that for me was very often we are facing challenges at work, problems, and they're problems that touch us and impact us directly, and we can get very involved in those, and we should, right? We should do the best we can with what we have. But I'm finding more and more over time that leaders who are really good leaders and make an impact can go up a level and see the bigger picture. They can see that, how do I not just solve my problem, but how do I do it in a way that solves the person upstream for me or downstream for me or my boss, because it's not just about me. There's a much broader thing. And that when I came back to Utah from Maryland and started working for another governor here, it was right at the height of the recession, and the agency I ran, caseloads were going up crazy, crazy, crazy. Revenue across the country was going down. And because of my experience in Maryland, I didn't want to go ask for more money, because I knew from every dollar I would ask for, that's a dollar not going to mental health or the environment or child welfare, because that experience broadened my view, right? It's not just about me. How do I get my needs met while creating wins for other people? It's harder. It's hard to do, and I'm not perfect at it, but that was a really important moment in time for me.
That is extremely powerful, Kristen. I like that you called that out. First off, thank you for quelling any political aspirations I have. But I love what you said about going up a level. And I'm a big believer in reading the room and seeing who all is or should be at the table and what looks like a win to those people. And I think one of the benefits too, like the work that you've just described, I mean, even if you do it poorly, it's better than not reaching out across the table, right? Because I think it's so vital that we understand the perspective and vantage point of all the folks that we're trying to help or influence, or ultimately is going to lead to transformation or meaningful change. The other benefit that I've had just through pivotal moments in my career looking back is, being able to draw from that experience to help other people see around corners. Like, I had this experience, or I made this mistake, so let me give you this advice so that you can see around that same corner when you come across it.
Yeah, I love that, because, we're in this together, and we were having this discussion before we started to record. But for me, part of leadership is I've gotten older. The older I get, I feel like the less I know.
I get that.
You get that. The older I get, the less I know. And I love how you said, even if you do it poorly, it doesn't have to be perfect. in the role of a manager or leader, as you move through your career and you want to find a way to create win-wins for everyone, or you want to, grow into a new way of leadership or expand how you see the world, or, change your process, there's going to be this area that it will feel new and very uncomfortable, and we may not do it perfectly. There's a great story I just read the other day. I love reading history, and back in Civil War times, I love the story. There's a General McClellan who was a great general, trained everybody, his troops loved him, he was fantastic, apparently great strategist, but he wouldn't attack. He was so scared of Robert E. Lee's armies, he wouldn't attack. So President Lincoln goes, encourages him, he still won't attack. President Lincoln finally writes him a letter and says, I'm paraphrasing, if you're not using your army, I'm going to borrow it. And I love that, because just act, even if it feels uncomfortable and scary. And there the stakes were very high, but in leadership, we often feel like we have to be perfect or know all the answers or have the perfect vision. And until it's perfect, until we feel like we can look good in front of everyone, we're not going to do it. And that's not where the learning happens. The learning and the growth happens when you're right in the middle of what you don't know how to do, haven't done it before, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. To be honest and transparent about that, to ask for help, to attack, to move, to go without perfection. I think that's just a pivotal thing to know, think about.
So well said, Kristen. I love that. I think, and that was exactly what we had talked about even just prior to jumping on. I think the greatest epiphany I ever had was realizing that I am not, and that I don't need to be, and that I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I know the role that I can play of, creating a situation or a meeting or a relationship, and I know how to influence and nurture that. And it isn't always me acting or speaking, but it's knowing when to. And that's also very powerful too, as far as, sometimes we need to kind of stoke the fear of, loss of a resource. I know a lot of times, even in, customer or team scenarios where there is inactivity, it's, it's telling them, hey, I have resources that are allocated to this project that we've looked at doing together. But if it isn't a priority now, I need to reallocate those resources. And you'd be surprised how often, that will get the response that maybe the last few times that you've reached out to people will not get.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's a super good example. So yeah, it's a journey. I really think the journey of improving our organizations, so we're trying to improve our careers or make an impact in our organizations, I have found is really the journey of self-improvement. Mm-hmm. There's things I do differently today than I did 10 years ago, right? To learn from that, to take the barriers down. It's to not act out of fear, to not feel like I have to control the outcome. I just have to focus on what's my piece of it. Both of us, we put out content to the world. You put out content, are people going to like it or not? That's not my goal anymore. I think there was a time in my life that would have been the goal. Now it's like, am I just living up to my own potential? Am I doing what I think is right? What I believe is good? Am I doing it in a way to serve other people, to create win-wins as much as I can? That keeps me motivated. When I feel like I've got to control outcomes and all that kind of stuff, it really demotivates me, and it's ridiculous because you can't control the outcomes. So the more I can just focus on what I need to do, what my role is, and not that I'm very outcome driven, but I know I can't force that. It's a byproduct of how I'm showing up every day. And I fail sometimes, sometimes I'm not showing up my best self, but those two, I think it's very difficult as leaders to impact the workplace or where we are in our teams if we're not really doing that soul searching on our own side.
That is, you just captured it perfectly, because I think that's what a lot of us have to get better at and have to train our brains to get better at, because I think a lot of times the default is to think, oh, well, I've got to, hit this number, or I've got to execute on this deliverable, right? And so we get so caught up in the end outcome that we forget that it's a series of inputs. It's a process. Yeah. It's making sure that you have the right people and resources engaged, and it's making sure that you have the right inputs and you manage to milestones, and that you control what you can control. We're in a similar boat. We just started a new fiscal year, and I admittedly, I had, last fiscal year was my first full year in a very specific role. And we tried to, turn over every stone in certain situations. There was a lot of, trying to gravitate toward everything that we thought we could do or impact. But, now it's, how can I take a really hard lens and look back and say, look, what worked? What do I need to lean into, do more of, and really prioritize and focus? What mattered most to my team, to our customers, that sort of thing. And then on the flip side of that, what might need to be reconfigured or jettisoned, not completely gotten rid of, but how can we be more effective and optimized? And that is process improvement.
That's process. And what's cool about what you said, we're like so kindred spirits, is that all of our organizations are made up. Right? There's physics and quark theory, and then there's human-made institutions and organizations.
Yep.
People had an idea, they put in a policy, procedure, developed a product, created a team, created an org chart, created a financial structure. They're made up. And if we're not getting the results we want, right, we can't control the outcome, but there's something going on in this black box, the system, the process, these assumptions that we bring to the table about what we can do or can't do, or where's the leverage point? All of these are assumptions of how we think. And the most important work I think leaders can do, we can learn the tactics and the tools, and you can learn how to value stream and all this stuff, and that's fine. The harder work is learning to think clearly and to challenge our own assumptions. The hardest work I think as a leader is to create clarity about what really is important, what to stop doing, what to start doing. But that is a thinking process. That's learning to think clearly, to sift through the noise versus the signal, to really challenge our own assumptions about what we're doing. Is that really true? Is that the only way I really can do that? Because ultimately we need our systems and processes to bend to the customer. Who's the customer? What do they need? What's their primary need? Are we delivering on that? And if we're not, our systems are perfectly designed to give us what we're getting today. So if we're not hitting those things that we want, can't control if people buy our product or not, but what are the inputs, what's happening in the system that's blocking us from achieving those outcomes we hope will be byproducts of our work. But that's really hard to be open. And this is why it goes back to what we talked about earlier, Carson, is to open ourselves up to our own false assumptions. That's hard work. That's about not just logically looking at it, but emotionally, like saying, I was wrong on that. That's hard to do.
Yes, so well said. Sure. And, I know we've talked about, pivotal moments and, things that have transpired in our lives and careers. Do you have any lessons from going blind that impact your work and your management philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, lots of them. I am blind, so to your audience, if my eyes aren't at the camera, I apologize. I went blind starting at age 12, and I'm 52 now. So many years ago, but it's progressive and slow. And there's this one story, I tell it a lot, but it was so important to me. There's two, but I'll share one for today. I ended up going to a residential training program for the blind. And you live there every day, all day. I was there for 5 months. You wear sleep shades, so if you have any residual vision, you can't use it. And you use power tools and saws, and you have to learn to barbecue and travel independently with the cane and all these things so that we could be independent as a blind person. And they were there to change how we thought, not just to teach us the tactics of Braille, but to change and challenge what we thought about blindness. And so one day my teacher was out working with me on cane travel, our white canes. And because to graduate from the course, they would put us in a van with our sleep shades on. They would drive us around randomly, so we didn't know where we were. They would drop us off at a random location. And then we'd have to find our way back to the training facility. And we could ask no questions, but we could ask one question from a pedestrian, and that was it. And then we could use a little Braille compass, but we had to problem solve. Of all the things I was learning, that was terrifying for me. And one day I was at the park practicing my cane travel, and my instructor at the time, an amazing man, Tony Cobb, came up to me because I was struggling. Every time I would walk, I would hit a bench, and then I'd take another step forward and I'd hit dirt. And then I'd hit grass, and I knew where I was. I could hear the freeway, but I couldn't get out of this park. Every time I moved, I hit something. So I just stopped. There was actually, I remember exactly, it was a very pivotal moment because I thought for a moment that this is what the rest of my life was going to be like just super hard and frustrating. My teacher came behind me and he let me struggle for a bit. Then he came behind me and he said something that I use every day in my life. And he said, Kristen, you've got to learn to walk through your fear, through your confusion, through your uncertainty.
Wow.
So the only new information you will get is by taking a step into the unknown. And he was right. When I hit the bench, it wasn't a failure. I knew there was a bench there.
Yeah.
When I hit the grass, it wasn't failure. I knew there's grass. And as a blind person, you have to walk into the world to figure what's there out there. You know, it doesn't come to you. And I spent a lot of years before that point being kind of scared to walk into the world. The judgment, people staring at you when you use a cane. What if I do this wrong? How am I going to access information? We can stagnate, not just as, you know, being blind, but we can stagnate by becoming cynical, giving up, becoming resentful, bitter, all these things that can happen to us. And the idea that this life, especially in the role of management and leadership, is this journey of self-improvement as we improve our organizations. It's uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah.
We don't know the answer. And if you want to achieve a different level of improvement, that means you're going to have to do things you didn't have to do before, and that's going to feel uncomfortable. But that's the space where the growth is. And so now when I travel by myself or I'm going through airports and it's uncomfortable and I don't like it, I can still remember that that's the price to pay. It's okay to be uncomfortable.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's a great lesson for me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think in thinking about that and reflecting on what you've just shared, you know, we all do that to ourselves so often, where we cast this lack of belief on ourselves, or we overthink things, or we, you know, look at the outcome as opposed to looking at the inputs in the process and what we can control. And I think that's the key takeaway that we can all have from this is, you know, how do we analyze our own life and our own scenario and our own perspective and experience in a way where we can believe that we are often our biggest limiters. You know, it's you don't develop a muscle unless you start developing the muscle, and it is going to be uncomfortable at first, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And I tell people that all the time, and that, you know, when you do things new, or you're thinking about, like, you know, you want to create and leverage meaningful content as an example. You know, you and I were both talking about this. I think, you know, when we both started, it sounds like we were very concerned with, you know, hey, is this content going to resonate? Is this quality content? But the reality is, put it out there in an effort to start conversation, and you'll be pleasantly surprised as to what transpires as a result. You'll have hits, you'll have misses. I've absolutely created content that nobody gravitated toward, and then I've had others that have beget relationships and conversations like this one as a result. And so I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, it's just, fear can drive us, and, you know, you're going to try a new job, or and here's the other thing is sometimes, and we still do this as adults. You're in a meeting, you have an idea, there's something that's important for you to say. I don't know if you've ever done this, Carson, but you don't say it, right? Or you don't make the recommendation. And we don't do that because we're scared what people will think, if it will be judged, maybe it's a bad idea. This goes back to this issue of acting, take action, even if it's imperfect action, because I really do believe this. I think the uniqueness of everyone's voice coming together in the debate and the discussion and the push and pull is what creates the great product, right? Not just one person from the pulpit saying, here's how the product should look like. It's the push and pull of the discussion and the dialogue that makes things great. But don't squelch your voice. To your point, don't limit yourself. If you don't trust your voice, who will? And it's risky, and some people may not like it, and that's okay, because your goal isn't to have everyone like you. Your goal is to be the best self you can be and try to make a positive difference in our each little corner of the world, that the world's better off because of, you know, we were here.
That's so important. And it reminds me, I saw a post the other day that somebody was actually proactively going out and thanking people that disagreed with them about, you know, whatever it was. You know, I think we have to be of the mindset, especially in today's climate, though I don't know that it's much different than it's ever been. It's just we have a lot more of a lens on it because of things like social media. But, you know, in today's climate, I think it's important to foster conversation and seek to understand. I don't have to agree fundamentally with everything that somebody says. In fact, what's the fun in that? But as long as I try to meet them where they are and at least understand what their vantage point is, because their vantage point is unique, that's what it's all about. But you know, one of the things that I'd love to ask you about is, no matter what we do, and especially the more you act and try to create and foster innovation or influence others, you're going to have naysayers.
Yes.
You're going to have people that are, detracting from what you're trying to do, or making, might be taking pot shots from the sidelines, whatever it is. How do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it can be hard. I've had to, I've taken pot shots, or people had pot shots at me publicly, and I'm not saying it's not still painful and it doesn't hurt, but that's not what should drive us. And so two important points, I think, on the naysayers, maybe even three. One is to know they will always exist.
Yeah.
All right. So when we face that reality, this isn't about having everyone love your idea. Impossible. It's about having the best idea. So number one. Number two, before you push your idea out, go to some of those naysayers and ask them, what would be your concern? What risks do you see in this? Because the idea of getting other people's what we call yes buts is how we get a better product or idea, right? The last thing we want to do is come up with a new service or product and we push it out there, and then we get this feedback we could have captured early on. And I've made that mistake, going out too soon without the feedback. So early on, as you're generating or gelling on some stuff, go to some of these naysayers. Maybe you don't even call them naysayers, people that may just disagree with you, or people you really respect, and just say, here's my idea. Tell me what your yes, what buts would be. What's the risk here? What could go wrong? What are the good things that people may have to give up because of this change? And how do we mitigate that? The more we can solicit that early on, the better our product, service, whatever we're doing is going to be, our content. And I think that the final point on this is my North Star is always internally is my primary customer. So if I'm, in the prison system or child welfare, homelessness, sometimes bureaucracies can get very lost. They start fixing problems internally that may or may not have any direct impact to the customer. So my North Star internally is always this North Star, my primary customer. So when I'm really focused on that and I've gotten the yes but, so I feel like I have a better solution for the people I serve, I'm okay with the naysayers because they're not where I'm focused, right? I'm focused on the primary customer. And if we don't have that focus, it's easy for the negativity to slip in. So I have to re-anchor myself back into, when you're in government, not everyone loves you. And, when you're trying to make changes, it's hard. And I've certainly made mistakes. But I think in Utah, for example, we have fewer employees today in Utah than we did in 2000 with higher quality because we made some big changes. But it was really about, for me, who's that primary customer? The ultimate customer receiving the service and the taxpayer. Those are the people I feel accountable to. And that helps me push through the naysayers because they'll come. They're going to be there. Use them where you can to your advantage to strengthen your product or service and stay focused on your North Star.
I love your outlook there, especially just that amazing thought to, rather than having trepidation around or reacting poorly to a naysayer situation, try to, don't necessarily surround yourself with people who will agree or that you're comfortable with. If you believe that somebody's going to have a different vantage point, proactively reach out to them and make sure that they're part of the process. I love that so much.
Yeah, it's good. And I learned this through doing it the wrong way, right? So
sure.
People younger than me or same age, take advantage of it because it really strengthens the product. And this goes back to that personal journey of improvement. Do you have the more emotional fortitude for somebody to look at your idea and say, poke holes in it?
Yes.
But the more we can separate ourselves from who we are as people versus our product, we can see it more objectively. We can have some objectivity about it.
Brilliantly said. The last thing I wanted to ask about, Kristen, you wrote about the seductive seven. What is the seductive seven and why are those seductive seven relevant to this discussion today?
Well, it actually is perfect for what we just talked about, the North Star, the primary customer. I've worked for 3 governors now, and in Utah, I managed the state budget for Governor Herbert for 8 years. $20 billion. It's a big budget, lots of programs, and it's very easy when we're in an organization or a team to have very internally focused initiatives. So the seductive seven, I would see as people would come for budget requests, I started to see these patterns. They would jump to, I need more money to solve my problem. I need a new piece of technology. I need more data. I need more reorganization. I need one more strategic plan, even though the last 10 didn't yield a breakthrough. So these are very administrative solutions we jump to. And it's not that they're not important, right? I use data, I use technology, but what these things are, they're inputs and they're tools. I've seen systems like set up these massive data lakes with no impact because why? They didn't know who their primary customer was. and what that primary customer's primary need was. And we could have a whole discussion on primary needs versus secondary needs, primary customer versus strategic customer. But when you set up a big data lake system and you don't realize that your primary customer has got to be the judge. So the judge has all the information he or she needs in real time to make a decision. And instead you spend 2 years building up servers and infrastructure. Not only have we spent money not wisely, but we didn't make an impact, right? And so the seductive 7 are very inward focused, bureaucratic, administrative things that we jump to. How many reorganizations have been people through? Any major impact to the bottom line? Now, if you know your customer and you understand what we call systems thinking and you understand all that, then you can bring in these important tools that are critical to strengthen and bolster and harden in the behaviors and the solutions you want. But minus that, we spend billions of dollars with very little impact. So important to me. It's a little book. The money goes to a blind organization I love. So plug for them, National Federation of the Blind. It's called Stop Degrading the Fish. And it just is, there's so much opportunity to make impact, but we have to shift into how will this solve a problem for my primary customer? And in the competitive market, when you have so many products and services that, it's a very red ocean market. Sometimes it's red ocean, meaning a lot of people in the same boat because they're not solving significant problems for their primary customer. So that's just a huge topic for me. And I think part of it is, I was going blind, Carson. I talk about this now, but in the days back, a couple decades ago, I was so ashamed of it. But for a few years, I was actually on Social Security disability income. I didn't have any job skills. I didn't know Braille. It was a really dark years of my life. And just having experienced the bureaucracy during the time I was going blind, the federal government reorganized these programs I was in, and they started new strategic initiatives, and they had new data systems and new research and all this stuff. Did that matter to me at all as a blind person? What did I need? Right. I needed a new mindset and I needed skills from the very top people out there. Luckily, I had some blind mentors who came into my life to help me and change my life. But the real question is, would your customers care about what you're doing? Does your primary customer care? And if you can't make that connection, we need to rethink. We have limited time and attention. It should go to the biggest leverage points that will have the biggest impact for those that we serve, our customers.
Brilliantly said. I've seen the most success that I've ever had as a leader and even as a seller in creating customer surveys or getting, their feedback and attention on what would matter most if we were to create it or provide resources. There's so many resources that are out there, but those who are successful are the ones that learn how to optimize them and how to best leverage them in a way that's meaningful for their audience, whomever that is. And I mean, even just to use a political metaphor, if we spend more time as leaders reaching our hand across the aisle and also making sure that we're investing in the relationships that are right in front of us, in the audience, listening, those are the types of things that matter most. And to the point that I think we've made today very soundly, it doesn't matter if you do it perfectly, it just matters that you do it.
Yeah, perfect. Kindred spirit. We're aligned on that one. Absolutely.
I know. So glad we connected, Kristen.
Yeah.
I know we're at time here. Anything else that you want to hit on before we sign off today?
Just an honor to be here. I love the topic, and we all just need to act. Trust your voice. Know that the fear and discomfort will be there, but stay focused on your North Star, right? And the rest becomes much simpler.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Kristen. Hopefully we'll have the chance to do this again sometime soon, and best of luck in everything you're doing.
Thank you.